Good afternoon, everyone. This webinar is being recorded. If you object, please disconnect at this time. Jackie, you may begin.
Thank you, Tony. On behalf of the U.S. Commercial Service and the International Trade Administration, we welcome all of you to today's program, Finding the Right Distributor in the Right Market. Today's program is part one of a three-part series called Mastering International Distributor Success. The subsequent dates for the second and third programs are May 6th and May 28th. You'll be able to find those on our Export Week website, part of our main trade.gov website. My name is Jacqueline Torsellini. I'm a senior international trade specialist with the U.S. Commercial Service and located in Connecticut. I want to thank you for joining us today. I want to thank Tony Sargis, my colleague, also located here in Connecticut, for helping to support today's program. Today, we're pleased to have Zach Selch of Global Sales Mentor share his insights on how to identify and manage international distributors. And we're also pleased to have Louise Kern, president of Global Business Information Services, Inc., who's also an International Trade Administration partner, and she will be providing valuable information about performing due diligence on potential distribution partners. Before we get to the presentation, a couple of items of note. As Tony mentioned, this program is being recorded, so we ask you to kindly exit if you are not comfortable with that. We will open up the lines for questions at the end of the presentation. And at this point, you can put any questions into the Q&A feature of the Teams webinar. After today's program, you may receive a request for us to finish a survey about the program, and we always appreciate your feedback. It helps us to improve our programs and provide you with information that you find most helpful. By the end of the day tomorrow, I will be sending out a follow-up email to everybody who has registered for today's program, providing a slide deck and notes that both presenters have provided to us. And lastly, we just want to mention that the views and opinions expressed in this presentation made by our speakers may not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the U.S. government. So what I'd like to do before we have our great presenters begin is to tell you a little bit about the U.S. Commercial Service. And this slide really covers a lot of the services that we offer. But as a U.S. government agency, we are here to support U.S. businesses with entering international markets. That could be selling goods or services. And we have offices all over the United States and all over the world to help you to enter those markets, to understand what export requirements are here in the U.S. and to understand what the import requirements are, as well as what's going on in your particular industry in that market. So, one of the things that we do with our offices overseas, and let me bring you to the next slide just so you can see our current footprint, where our offices are located. One of the things we're going to be talking about today, and I think the items that Zach will be going into, as well as some of the things that Louise will be going into, are things that we can work with in unison with consultants and with businesses. The U.S. Commercial Service provides some really great market research support. We have options via our website, which has some really great algorithms that are being updated all the time to help companies to identify their top markets. In addition, with that, you can work with your local trade specialist to really fine tune that market research. And once you've identified your top markets, you work with your local trade specialist to reach out to our colleagues in those top markets to do a further investigation if that's an appropriate market for you. Once we help you identify, yes, we'll use Spain as an example. Once you identify that, we'll work with our office in Spain to provide you with what would be appropriate services. That can be what we call an initial market check, which really helps to ensure that that is an appropriate market for you, or go a little further and go through our international partner search options, where we help identify partially pre-vetted partners for you to potentially work with and work out to determine if they're going to be the best partner for you. And our highest level of service as far as partner identification is called our Gold Key service, where you actually go to that market and meet with these potential partners in person so you can do some final vetting. Our presenter, Louise, today is going to be talking about how to perform due diligence to really make sure that the partner is appropriate for you. We also have some services that can work in unison with that, as far as what we call an international company profile. And those are just some of the services that we offer, but I wanted to bring those to your attention today. So before we begin, I would like to mention that Louise and GloBIS are a partner of the International Trade Administration. And in addition, they are an overall sponsor for our programming here through Export Week, as well as Shipman. So we'd like to thank our sponsors today. And with that, I would like to introduce you first, give you a little overview about Zach. Our first presenter is Zach Selch, and he has been 35 years as a global sales leader. He realized that what he truly enjoyed was helping those responsible for international sales growth achieve excellence. For companies under $500 million, international success hinges on having engaged, competent, and accountable partners selling in the right markets, paired with the right systems to drive performance. Many executives find themselves responsible for global sales, but struggle to drive engagement and implement accountability structures. Zach is the expert who helps them succeed. He has sold to 135 markets around the world for a NASDAQ 100 company, a $500 million family-owned manufacturer, and a dozen startups across industries ranging from fast-moving consumer goods and construction tech to IT, SaaS, and medical products. Zach is the only coach and trainer for international sales VPs who has both been in their shoes and has the connections and expertise to guide them to success. And then our second presenter will be Louise Kern, who is president of Global Business Information Services. She is a Chicago native and began her career in the business information industry in 1996. She's lived in mainland China, Austria, Germany, and France, speaks fluent Mandarin and German, and is conversant in French. Louise holds a BA and an MA in East Asian and Socialist, Post-Socialist Studies from the University of Chicago, and is a graduate diploma in Chinese International Relations from the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies at Nanjing University. In 2003, Louise founded Global Business Information Services, initially focused on China due diligence, which quickly expanded to a global scope. Today, GloBIS provides comprehensive credit reports and due diligence on companies of all sizes and industries worldwide. GloBIS, as I mentioned, is a strategic partner of the International Trade Administration and has been a supplier of international company profile reports to the U.S. Commercial Service since 2004, covering nearly a dozen countries from Angola to Vietnam. GloBIS is an SBA certified small business and the provider of foreign credit reports for the U.S. Export-Import Bank Export Credit Insurance Office via a GSA contract. So without further ado, I would like to have Zach join us and begin his part of his presentation. Thank you.
Hello, thanks so much for that warm introduction. I have a lot to cover and not a lot of time, so I'm just going to jump right into it. Next slide, please. So I work with a lot of people who are very well educated, experienced sales managers who get into this role of being in charge of international sales, and typically they'll get in and they'll struggle for a couple of years to find a half dozen distributors on the one hand, or you'll get people who have 45 distributors, and when I talk to them, they will say, yeah, I have 45 distributors, I'm covering the whole world, but you know how it is, 80% of them are pretty much worthless and 20% of them do all the work. And those two profiles are really common. People who go years struggling to find a couple of distributors, and people who have, 80% of their distributors just don't do the job. So what we're going to talk about today is how to get the right people. Next slide, please. There are essentially 3 ways to grow your international sales. You can grow your total addressable market by getting into new markets with the right distributors. You can increase your distributor hours, or you can increase your distributor competency. Each one of those will impact your sales. If you increase your total addressable markets by 10%, you're going to grow your sales 10%. Your sales hours, your competency. Now, if you can increase each one of those by, say, 16%, you are going to double your sales. And this is what my whole life is about, working with people to help them drive this up. But the best way to start is to start with really good distributors. Next slide, please. So this is the hardest part of any time I talk to people. I don't necessarily like to brag or talk about it, but I have done a lot. I've onboarded 1,400 distributors. I've sold in 135 markets. I've beat quota 125 quarters, and I've done over $1 billion in purchase orders. The reason I say this is because I'm going to be telling you over the next 28 minutes or so a lot of stuff that is going to sound counterintuitive and different from what other people tell you. But typically, when I come into a company, I get a couple of 100% growth almost immediately. 4 times I've driven 1,000% growth. 1 time I drove 4,000% growth because I do things differently. So for the next half hour, sort of suspend disbelief and listen to what I'm going to say, and you'll see if you can use it or not. Next slide, please. What we're going to try and do is say what you want to be is you want to be selling in the correct markets with engaged, competent, and accountable distributors. Today, we're going to be talking about that engaged, competent, and accountable distributors part. And we want systems and cadence of accountability in place. If you come to my last talk this month, at the end of the month, I think the 28th, that's when we're going to be talking about systems, okay? But today we're talking about finding engaged, competent, and accountable distributors. If you are at this point within this Venn diagram, this is where explosive growth will happen. Okay, next slide, please. And what we're talking about, like I said, is distributors. Next slide, please. I like to say that there are 3 elements of every distributor like a triangle. Okay, and what that means is you cannot have a triangle without each part of the side. If one side equals 0, it isn't a triangle anymore. It will fall over. So you need a minimum of each, but maybe one of them is going to be significantly bigger than the others. What are those elements of the distributor? Next slide, please. Engagement, competency, and bandwidth. Now, imagine that the size of the bubble is the bandwidth, and then the x-axis is engagement, the y-axis is competency. Now, when you start and you have, say, 45 distributors, and they're all going to be different sizes, which is fine, depending on the market and depending on how good a distributor you found, right? but some of them will be more engaged, some of them will be less engaged, some of them will be more competent, less competent. What we want is for all of them to be engaged and competent and of the correct bandwidth for that market. Okay, that's what we're aiming for. We don't always get that in the beginning, but that's what we're trying to get. Now, what you'll see on this chart is the way you drive up competency is by driving up engagement. If the distributor is more engaged with you, they will be willing to increase their competency. It is virtually impossible to change a distributor's bandwidth once you've engaged them. So you have to think about this. Next slide, please. Now, that said, most people I know in this business essentially are working with random distributors that they found. I like to say a random guy who walked up to them at a trade show. And when you talk to people in the business, most of them will say, well, yeah, this one sent me an email, this one walked up to me. And it's like pulling out a bingo ball, playing bingo or doing lottery or throwing darts at a map, right? It's random. And I hate doing things in a random way. Now, think about this for 1 second. What would happen if you knew that you needed somebody to run a production element of your factory, right? A line, and you just sort of waited for some random dude to knock on the door of the factory and say, hey, I'd like to try it out, right? Very often, this is what we're getting when we go up to a trade show and we put up a sign that says distributors wanted, and somebody walks in. They are pulling us into markets maybe we shouldn't be in. And they are possibly, pushing us into working with a distributor that we did not look for. So what we're going to talk about now is how do we change that? How do we drive sales? Next slide, please. And what you'll see is I'm working with a lot of very, very good sales VPs and sales directors who are totally changing the game. I have clients who have won the E Award for Export Excellence, District Export Council members, people who are driving huge sales growth because they aren't doing things randomly anymore. Next slide, please. I'm going to take a little detour. This is Takiro Kobayashi. I don't know if any of you know him. He is the world's fastest eater. He does something that everybody else does. He just does it differently than anybody else. I won't go into the details. When I do a long lecture, I talk about it. Look him up. He eats hot dogs differently than anybody else, and he does it faster than anybody else. So he took something that everybody does, and he totally changed it. Next slide, please. And this is David Braidsworth. He is the bicycle coach in England. He does things exactly the opposite from Takiro Kobayashi. He came in, and the British bicycle team had never won anything. And he got them to be world champions in about 2 years by going through every little detail of what they did and changing it. The color of the paint on the inside of the van, what type of food they ate, what type of toothpaste they used, every little detail, okay? So what I like to do is I like to think of myself as working in a combination of those two things. Some things I completely changed, some things I changed little details. And now we're going to get into the meat of the stuff. I'm sorry it took a couple of minutes to get there, but I hope you'll find this interesting. Next slide, please. The first thing that I like to talk about is an ideal distributor profile. If you guys, however many of you are in sales or went to business school, you've heard about the ideal customer profile or the ideal client profile. I like to talk about the ideal distributor profile. I like to be thinking about what that person is who should be selling your products. Next slide, please. And the first question of that is, what do the people who buy from me look like? Okay, and this is really important. Sometimes I'll talk to clients and they'll say, well, I sell to hospitals. No, let's dig in. You sell to the chief radiologist of the ICU, or you sell to the chief radiologist of the MRI department, or you sell to the fleet manager of a local logistics company, right? Think about the person you're selling to. Now, more than that, typically, when you're selling big capital goods, you're selling to multiple people. You're selling to a financial person or a purchasing person who pays for it. And that person has to approve of the ROI. Then you're also selling to something like a maintenance person or a technical person who will approve that your product does what it's supposed to do and will integrate with their existing systems. And it's very important to sell to these people. But the most important person is that person who actually needs your product and decides that they want your product. So we're working with a situation where that's the person we want to be thinking about. Our distributor or our partner has to know how to sell to that person. Next slide, please. Now, the next thing is, well, how do they want to buy? Do they buy through tenders? Do they want to buy online? How much are they going to be doing research online before they buy? What is involved in the purchasing process? Because if we understand this, we will be able to understand the sales process that we're going to use to sell to them. Next slide, please. And I'm always going to build up. I'm sorry, you're probably going to have to hit that 4 times to get everything up. I want to build up the, can you click twice more, please? I'm going to build up the sales process, and I'm not going to tell you here how to build up your sales process maps. There are multiple different theories. All I'm going to say is you need one, right? Whatever you use it. I like to think of this as the primary things are building trust and helping the customers internalize that we can help solve their problem. But we also need to find the customers, and we have to deliver, okay? And then next slide, please. And then we break this down into a map that'll go to 17 or so components, okay? Sometimes I've had sales process maps that are 30 components. Sometimes I've had as few as 11. But we want to figure out exactly what's involved. Now, what does this mean? Well, if we're dealing with a tender, well, we have to help spec the tender. We have to talk to the people who are going to write the tender. Then we have to apply for the tender. Answer the tender, all of that, right? But if we're just talking to specific people, there's probably going to be a finding the customer. There's going to be an intro meeting. There's going to be a discovery meeting. There's going to be a demo, etc. And we have to plan out what's involved. And I like to divide it up between this issue of, well, finding customers, establishing trust, helping the customers internalize that we solve their problem, and then delivery. And I divide it up between what headquarters is going to do, what the regional sales manager is going to do, what the distributor is going to do, and then maybe what we might outsource. Now, at this point, now I know what the distributor needs to do. I know what the competencies are that the distributor needs. Now, let me just explain this for a second. Does he need to be able to do a demo? In some cases, you don't want the distributor to do the demo because maybe your product is so physically big that you're going to fly him to a reference site to see it. Or maybe it's software and you're going to do it remotely from your office, okay? So maybe the demo isn't relevant. Maybe the demo is the single most important thing. Maybe finding the customers is very, very important. Or maybe you're selling to something like telephone companies or hospitals, and there are only 10 of them in the territory, and you know them, so he doesn't need to find anybody. You have to figure out what are the competencies you need from the distributor. Next slide, please. And then you need to figure out what the bandwidth is for every target market, okay? And this is really important. What do I mean by the bandwidth? Well, a salesperson has about 2,000 hours a year, okay? There are 2 ways to figure out bandwidth. One is you say, well, I need 120 sales a year. They're each going to take about 10 hours. That's 1,200 hours a year. So I need about 60% of a full-time equivalent. The other way is you say, well, there are 4,000 targets in the market. I want my customer to hit about 1/3 of them a year, which means, let's say, I want him to do 1,200 new prospects a year, 10 a piece, etc. So what we're doing is we're trying to figure out and balance out how many hours a year to give good coverage. Now, it could be 5 full-time equivalents. It could be a quarter of a full-time equivalent. But before we even start, we need to understand what the competencies are and what the requirements are in that market. Next slide, please. So a few rules of thumb. It's really hard to judge engagement. It's very hard to change bandwidth, okay? If you talk to somebody and he says, I have one salesperson, he isn't going to hire a salesperson because he engages with you, okay? And the ability to increase competency is more important than competency. He doesn't necessarily have to know how to sell your product, but he does have to have the ability to learn how to sell your product, okay? Think about that carefully. Sorry. Next slide, please. And this brings us to the next real big challenge here. Having gathered up all this information, now what we want to be thinking about is, what is this person, this ideal distributor, what is he selling today? Okay, because if he's a distributor, he is selling somebody else's product. You don't necessarily want a distributor who's selling your competitor's product, but if he's sitting around unemployed, he probably isn't a very good distributor. He's probably doing something. So what is he selling today? Well, let's take a look at who your ideal customer is, right? That person who is going to decide to buy your product. And let's take a look at how that person likes to buy, right? And let's take a look at the sales process, what's involved. And now we can sort of also balance in your brand image. Are you a high quality product, or are you a cheap product? Are you something that's fast moving? Or are you something that's considered reliable? Okay. And then also more or less the price point, because if somebody is really, really comfortable selling a $300 product and you are $300,000, that's probably not a good fit. If somebody's really comfortable selling a $300 million product and you're a $300,000 product, also probably not a good fit. So we're going to put all that together. And now we are going to identify what these people should be selling. And I like to pull together maybe as many as 8 different products and brands. Now let's go back to one important point. I'm not talking about competitors. I'm talking about other products that the same distributors probably should be selling, okay? Because this is going to give me a great list of the people I want to look for. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm just going to say this. Typically, when I do this series or I talk about finding distributors, I actually do a talk beforehand, which is how to decide on the markets you're going into, because it's really important to know about the markets. Since I didn't do it this time, if anybody reaches out to me through my website or through my LinkedIn, I will send you, I have a book, specifically a 100-page book on finding the right markets. And it's a great complement to the commercial service for this, right? They also will help you. But I think my book will give it from my perspective, and it could be very helpful. But finding the right markets and making sure that you are in the right markets is really, really important, because now what we have is we know what these people should be selling. We know what markets they're in. So what we're basically going to do is say, okay, is France the right market? Yes. Let's say I'm going to France, Germany, I'm going to Nigeria, I'm going to Egypt, I'm going to Brazil. Okay, so what I'm looking for are the people who sell these 8 products in these 20 countries, and that's my list. Next slide, please. And now comes the fun part, is I'm going to search for them, because I've identified I am looking for the guy who sells brand X in country Y, okay? I know what I'm looking for now. I'm not just going to a trade show and putting up a sign and saying distributors wanted. I am saying there is a guy in Brazil who is selling brand X, and I'm going to be looking for him. Makes my life a lot more focused. So How am I going to find him? Next slide, please. First thing I'm going to do is very basically, I'm going to go to the websites of these companies, and about 30% of the time, they will give me a list of their distributors. So I can go to their website. Next slide, please. Sometimes it'll look like this. Sometimes it'll look like this. It could be in the contact section. It could be find a distributor. It could be how do I buy from you. Keep looking at the website. About 30% of the time, it will tell you. Now, very often I will just call up the sales manager and I'll say, hey, I'm Zach. I do not compete with you. I was wondering if you could introduce me to your distributor in Brazil. And a certain percentage of the time they'll do that. It's worth a try. I'll tell you something else about the commercial service. If you reach out to the commercial service in Brazil and you say, find me a distributor, they'll find you a distributor. If you call Jefferson in Sao Paulo and you say, hey, I would like to meet the guy who sells brand X in Brazil. Who is it? He'll tell you. He probably knows. And if he doesn't, he can find out in a couple of minutes and he will introduce you. Okay, so these are different ways to go about it. Next slide, please. You can find this through Sales Nav. If you're a little bit competent with figuring out Sales Navigator, you can find the distributors who sell these other products, right? There are different ways of going about doing it. One way is to look for companies, previous companies that people worked for. So for instance, if you are looking for people who are selling, say, German-made ventilators in, let's stick with Brazil, okay, so you go to the country of Brazil, you look for small companies because distributors are typically under 50 people with a function of selling, and you say, I'm looking for people who used to work for Draeger. You are going to find all the ventilator distributors in Brazil, okay? Now this is work, but I do this all the time, right? This is a way to find distributors. I'm sorry, next slide, please. Small trade shows, okay? As a rule, manufacturers have booths at big trade shows and distributors have booths at small trade shows. So for instance, in Almaty, in Kazakhstan, there are 12, 15 trade shows a year, and each one of them just has distributors. Now, if you can get your hands on those catalogs, you are going to find all the distributors you want for those countries. But I just picked out Almaty because I just picked it out randomly because I've been to those shows. But probably 15 countries in Europe, many countries in Africa, many countries in Latin America, many countries across Asia have those type of shows, these small regional shows, and they are full of distributors. You just have to get hold of the catalog or go to them. Next slide, please. You can buy attendee lists from trade shows, okay? So if there is a trade show, a big trade show in your field, the people going will be exhibitors and distributors. So if you buy the list for $1,000 and then you go through and you sort it by manufacturer and by distributor, and then you sort it by the country, you will come across a list of 100 to 200 distributors from the countries you're interested in. Then you go through them and you figure out what they're selling, okay? Next slide, please. No, I'm sorry, previous slide, I think. Yep. All right, now what you have is you have a list of, let's say, 5 to 8 distributors in 20 countries, okay? So what you're going to now do is you can try and find everybody's email. I have software that'll find me everybody's email and telephone number, but you can actually go to Fiverr and you can say to people, hey, I need you. I have these 50 companies or these 200 companies. can you get me, please, their telephone numbers, their emails, and also their CEOs or their owner or their founders' telephone and email, and as many of their senior executives' telephones and emails, okay? Because you don't necessarily want to be just going to their website and calling their switchboard. Next slide, please. Then you go back to Fiverr and you hire people who speak Spanish and Arabic and Swahili and other languages. And you say, okay, I want you to call these people and set up meetings with me. Okay, so let's walk through this really quickly. We figured out who the person is we want. We found them. We got their contacts. And now we're getting somebody to set up a meeting with them. Okay, so when we think back to the beginning, and we say, okay, there's somebody who is in this job and they've been trying to set up distributors for a couple of years and they've only found, you know, a handful of distributors over 2 years. The steps that I've just walked you through will get you a list of distributors and meetings with them in a matter of weeks. I set up entire distribution organizations for people in 180 days across the world using this process. Next slide, please. Okay, now what do? We are pitching to them. Remember, they are different from regular customers, okay? There are 3 elements of the pitch to a distributor. There's money, okay? They want to be able to make money, but it isn't just about money. Is it easy to work with me, okay? They don't want to work with a principal that is very rigid and difficult to work with. And they need to trust you, okay? Because trust is really important. Every distributor has been screwed over by an American company and by other companies, but a lot of times by American companies. So if they can't trust you, they're not going to work with you, even if they think there's a lot of money to be made. Most people, when they pitch to distributors, and I've seen 1,000 of these pitches, people will come and they'll start talking about the quality of their product and the quality of the steel, and they'll talk about the founder came over from Italy in 1912 and all of this stuff. Nobody cares. Money, ease, trust. Now you can put together a pitch. If you really want to knock this out of the ballpark, write something up, run it through AI and say, look, I am pitching to a distributor. I want this to be in easy high school English. I want it to focus on the fact that they can make a lot of money, that it is easy to work with me, and that they can trust me, right? Maybe get some information about the market for your product in their country and build a pitch like this. I like to build up a 2-minute pitch video for distributors. So once I've gotten their email and their telephone number and we've reached out and set up a meeting, I can send them this short pitch video and it walks through why they should work with me. And it gets them very excited because I want them to be very excited. Next slide, please. And that is pretty much it. Now, a quick admin thing before we pass this over. There will be 2 more of these lectures. This one covers how to find them. I will then be talking about how to onboard them, train them, get them ready, and then I'll talk about how to manage them. These are 3 pieces of the puzzle. Taken together, this will give you explosive growth, and it's all free. If you want to go to my website, I have a lot of different free resources that you can pull down, and if you reach out to me, I will send you that book on finding the right markets. I have a bunch of other books available on Amazon. That is it. I'm open for questions when Jacqueline says that I am open for questions. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Zach. At this point, we're going to go and introduce Louise so she can get started and we'll take questions at the end. Thank you.
Thanks for that handover, Jackie. Amazing presentation, Zach. I took notes on that. That was really fantastic. So Zach helped everyone with these concrete steps on how to find the perfect, most awesome distributor for you. And I'm going to give you some tips on how to make sure that things are as terrific as maybe your search led you to believe. So next slide, please. So why do you need to do due diligence on the fantastic people who you've found, who you maybe want to do business with and have be your distributor? What do you need to know about them? How do you do it? And at some point, you might want to say, well, who can do this for me? Next slide, please. So the most important thing with the due diligence on a distributor is that you want to make sure that that distributor is not going to mess with you in a bad way. Like Zach was talking about how the distributor wants to be able to trust you. Well, you also need to be able to trust that distributor. So, for example, you want to make sure that they're not going to steal your IP, that they're basically not going to steal your brand in that market. Because if you partner up with the wrong company, you could be permanently damaged in that market. You could lose your brand identity, and you could potentially never get it back. Prevention is affordable. So preventing partnering with the wrong company, it's affordable. Many of the things I'm going to show you are actually free. But if you do partner with the wrong company, it's going to be super expensive to extricate yourself from that. And sometimes it's even impossible. Next slide, please. At a minimum, you should be finding out this information on all of your partners worldwide, whether they are your distributors or your suppliers or whatever. And the reason for this is you want to be able to find them should something go wrong, but these are really standard things that you should know about everybody. You want to know their full legal name, including the company type. So that's like for my company, it's an Inc. on the end, because that is a part of the legal identity of the company. You want to know their name in the local language. Now there, I mean, like if it's a Chinese company, they're registering their company in Mandarin. So the Chinese characters of their name that's going to be their official local language name. It's going to be a unique identifier for them. There will only be one company in that country with that local language name, like Arabic or Chinese or Russian, something like that. You also want to know what their business registration number is. That's also going to be a unique identifier. You want to know the date of their business registration, because that will help you get an impression. Well, how long have they been around? You want to know their address, also in the local language, meaning like if it's in Chinese characters, you want to have that. If you need to get in touch with the company for any reason, the local post office perhaps might not understand if you write their address in English, but if you write it in the local language, like Chinese characters or Arabic, then the local post office will have a much better chance of actually finding them. You want their contact numbers, so you can reach them if you really need to talk to them. And you want to know their website, because there are some things that you can learn from the website about them. For example, if you look up the website registration, you can see when was it registered. That will give you a good impression of when the company itself was registered. So if you ask your potential distributor partner for this information and they resist sharing this with you, that would be a red flag for you to move on, because all of these things are not top secret things. These are things that they should have readily available and be willing to share with you at the drop of a hat. Next slide, please. So how can you verify whether a company is registered in that country? Well, one of the hacks to do this, put in the country name and company search. And oftentimes you will find the direct link to the government website with the company information. So for example, it's like a here we have the example of the gov.uk. We want to see a website that's like gov or gv. We're looking for the official provider of company information because the databases that they have tend to be more accurate and more current, more thorough than the ones that are held by private companies. It's a general rule. It's not always the case, but it's a general rule that the government companies' house registries will be more accurate and more thorough than the private ones. The hot link, you'll get these slides after the presentation. The hot link for the gov.uk site in there actually takes you to a huge list of registries in different countries. It doesn't have every country in there, but it has a lot of them. And very many of these official company registry sites are available for free and without registration. So that's an excellent place for you to go. If you can't find the list on that gov.uk list, then try what I said about company name and company search. There's also a terrific free website to use called opencorporates.com. Their accessibility of information is a little bit less than it used to be, but oftentimes they will have the links to the actual source information. So what you do on that website is you put in the company name, or you can also search by the officer name, the officer of the company, and you can limit it by the jurisdiction. So say you're only looking in Brazil. I generally don't limit the jurisdiction so that I see what comes up. Sometimes you can find out about related parties in other countries by going to that site. So let's say you put in the name of the company and you click search, it will pull up all companies with that name or a very similar name and have a hot link to further details on that. And generally at the bottom of that, it will have a link to where that information was from. Like if it's, a Nigerian company, it will have a link to the Nigerian company registry's website. So you can click on that and then go through the steps again to find the concrete information on that foreign company. Also US companies, they have tons of information on US companies as well. And if a company was set up less than 1 year ago, it's a red flag. It's a red flag for numerous reasons. The main one is that most scamming companies can't last for more than a year. Definitely in today's, digital age, if people got scammed by someone, they're probably going to blog about it, or somehow the information is going to be online. And generally those companies those scamming companies can't last for more than a year. So it is a red flag if a company has not been around for more than a year. Of course, not every new company is a scammer, but most scamming companies are new companies. Also for a distributor, it's important for you to have a partner who has experience. So if they have been around for less than 1 year, that doesn't mean you can't do business with them, but you definitely need to find out from them what experience do they have that's relevant, because the company has not been around for very long. Next slide, please. So other things that you can do, review online feedback about the company. Google is your friend. There's just a ton of information that you can find if you just plug in that company's name and you search for online reviews for them. I have a tendency to focus on the negative reviews instead of the positive ones. And you can look for comments in trade forums, social media. You want to evaluate the experience they have, because as Zach said, you want a partner who's going to work for you. Maybe they handle a brand that is parallel to yours, but you want to see what the experience was. So you want to ask for references, and you actually want to check those references. The things with the references that we really want to see are they with the email address, is it a Gmail account or is it actually a company name? We prefer it if it's a company name, because we're really trying to tie that individual to that company. If it's a phone number, we prefer to have a phone number that's not a switchboard. Sorry, losing my voice. We want it to be a switchboard of a company, not like a cell phone or something like that. If it's a cell phone, you don't actually have a way to connect it confidently to the company. So it could just be somebody pretending to work for a company. So we don't like that. We like hard facts. Google them in the local language too. So again, like Arabic or Chinese. Yes, I know not everybody speaks every language, but Google Translate, things like that can help you out. Because generally, if someone's done something bad, excuse me, folks, if someone's done something bad, it's the local people who are probably going to be writing about it first. And this is actually a hack to find out about legal issues for a company. Sometimes the legal records are not easily accessible online or in person. So if someone has done something wrong or bad or rumors of it, but rumors can sometimes be worthwhile to read, then it's probably going to be in the local language. So be sure to do a Google search in the local language and then just put it into Google Translate to see what all the results mean. Next slide. So Jackie did mention the International Company Profile Report a couple times. Yes, GloBIS has been doing these since 2004. For the U.S. commercial service, we don't do them for them in every country. But if you got an awesome one, it was probably done by GloBIS. But these reports are the facts about a company, and they include information that is impossible or very difficult for you to get on your own, doing your own. It's something that, a firewall, the paid information can be worth its weight in gold. So, for example, the reports will include the financials of the company if that information is required to be disclosed in that country. Like US private companies are not required to disclose their financials, but Chinese companies are. So you can get the financials in some countries and not in others. You can have, the report will include also the legal and regulatory compliance issues. You want to make sure that these companies are following the local laws. And the final step that you're going to get in the ICP from the commercial service on that potential distributor partner for you is the litigation record. As I said at the beginning, one of the most important things that you need to be concerned about with your distribution partner is, has anybody sued them before for stealing their identity? If you have that distribution partner set up your website for them in that country, they're going to own it, not you. So you want to take care of things yourself. Like you want to set up the website yourself. You want to have ownership of it. You want to check that litigation record that shows up in the International Company Profile Report to see if that company has engaged in anything that you would be worried that you would not want them to do with you. Next slide. I think that's it. Yes. I almost got my 10-minute mark on there, but I'm also available for questions. Thanks very much. I'm going to hand it back over to Jackie.
Thank you. Thank you, Louise. Thank you to both Zach and Louise for those excellent presentations and excellent information. I think all of you most likely found it very interesting. And we did have one question in the chat, and we could direct it to both Zach and Louise, and it's really about going back to the bandwidth of your partner. If you can, Zach, maybe start with you, talk a little bit more about the bandwidth.
Sure. So bandwidth just means how many boots on the ground, how many hours they can give you. And if you think about it, the more sales hours you have, the more you're going to sell. So pretty much every distributor is going to handle anywhere from 4 or 5 products to 1,000 products. You want to make sure that for your product, if you work with a distributor that has 1,000 products, they probably will have divisions. So you want to make sure they have a division that fits your product and that they're going to have people dedicated. And I always put that in the agreement, and I always verify it. I'll talk about that in my future discussions where I talk about managing distributors. But what you want to make sure of is that they actually have enough bandwidth for the needs of that market. And say Saudi Arabia needs more than Qatar. Brazil needs more than Panama, right? You have to figure out, and you can calculate how much bandwidth you really need to cover that market. You have to do that calculation before you start reaching out to distributors, so you know what you're looking for. You need to know, the competencies, but you also need to know what the bandwidth requirements are going to be for a market you're going into in order to get the best results out of that market.
Great, thank you. And Louise, for you, I think more pointedly, the question is, how long does it typically take for, say, somebody to do this due diligence on their own? You walk them nicely through these processes that they could, the process they could use, steps that they can take. How much time should a company feel like they're spending on the due diligence portion of this?
Thanks for that question, Jackie. So the points that I provided of things that you can do yourself, yeah, I'm a professional. I mean, I do this every day. I've got this down to a couple of minutes. There are really these things that you should be absolutely working into the very beginning of when you found someone, following Zach's guidance of, like you found 8 companies that you want to look at. Go ahead and do all of those steps with them right at the start. The information that you can gather yourself by doing the open source searches on Google, you're going to get to a point where it probably takes you 5-10 minutes to do the core information. But then as far as the reputation and things like that, you should give yourself several hours for that. Mark out the time, because sometimes you can really go down rabbit holes on things like this, but sometimes those rabbit holes are very, very fruitful. But that's where you have to decide, is this something I want to continue doing on my own, or do I want to hand this over to a professional? For example, the U.S. Commercial Service, who with their ICP service, which is focused on doing this kind of work. So I have to say, from my personal opinion, I truly mean this. You should have some professional due diligence done on the company, because it is your extension overseas. The information in my slides, I would really encourage you to do to help you decide whether you do want to take the next step of doing the professional due diligence on your potential distributor. You want to make sure right at the beginning, before you spend hours of your own time building up your relationship with this company, whether they're just a scammer straight out.
Right.
You don't want to waste your time on them.
Yeah, very good point. Thank you, Louise. And I see Tony has a question.
Yeah, Jackie, we just had an email question for Louise and Zach. So this one, I think it's a little bit 2-part. So when asking for references, what is the minimum information we should be requesting? So I'll start with Louise on that. So what types of information should we be asking for at minimum when we're asking for references?
You want to have a company that they have been, well, first of all, for the ICP, the U.S. Commercial Service specifically states prefer to have U.S. companies that they've been doing business with. That might not always be possible. So you can ask them for companies they've been doing business with, preferably for over 3 years. And if it's an industry that is somehow parallel to yours, or somehow that the company thinks it's relevant to that, and how many years have they been working with that company, you want to have the direct name and contact details for the person working there, meaning you want to have the telephone number, preferably the switchboard number, and you want to have the direct email address for that. And then when you reach out to the companies who are the references, then you want to explicitly ask, what was your experience like with that company? How long have you been working with them? Can you give me details on the volume? Did they meet expectations? Things like that. I'm sure Zach has some more concrete things like that.
And
Yeah,
Louise,
just-
the question too, just to add on it, the other part of the question is, from your perspective, this is for Zach as well, is there a value in a U.S. reference versus a foreign reference? And then for Zach, the last part of this question was, when you're identifying a new distributor, are you looking for new distributors that have worked with U.S. companies previously? Is there more value in that than companies that have not worked with a U.S. company prior?
So there's some value in having worked with a U.S. company because of maybe the cultural, but if they've worked with a good German or a good Korean company, personally, let's go back to the idea of the brand of your brand. Now, most American companies don't put themselves in the same position as, say, a Chinese or a Pakistani brand. So if you're going and you're talking to a distributor and their whole portfolio is Pakistani manufacturers, that might not be a good fit for your brand image. Okay. But when I'm talking to references, I'm going to look at the competencies I want, right? I'm going to say, well, does Joe know people in my target customers? Is Joe good at doing demos? Is Joe good at doing intros? Does Joe report the way you want? Does he comply with your rules? If you say you want him to give you a bi-weekly report, does he give you those reports? That's the type of thing that I'm going to be asking when I talk to references, and I'm going to want to talk to essentially the VP of sales or the regional sales manager who manages them. And as long as it's a quality company, usually what I'm going to find is European international sales managers, American international sales managers, they'll be good to give me that type of help. All right.
Great. Thank you. And Louise, maybe if you wanted to give a quick summation, because we're at the top of the hour at this point. Thank you.
The most important factor from my side is bring the due diligence into the beginning of your search So once you've found a company, go ahead and do those steps on them to make sure you want to continue reviewing them as a partner. So don't do it as an afterthought, because you've probably already used so much time and resources to build up that relationship. If you find some negative information, you're probably going to try to find some way to talk your way out of ignoring the bad information. So if there's any bad information, you want to know it as early as possible.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank both of you today for offering your time and sharing all